What would be useful, Will, if you can kindly introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Will Wilson. I historically trained as a chartered accountant, so I have an audit background, which actually is quite useful for when it comes to understanding a lot of these security issues, before moving more into the cybersecurity world. So I was at PwC and then was at a FTSE 250 in a head of threat protection and governance role. So it's a bit of a mouthful, but ultimately it comes down to cybersecurity and InfoSec, data protection, business continuity and disaster recovery, and generally any other technology governance issues that no one else wants to try and tackle.
Threat protection and governance. What a mouthful!
Yeah.
What a slight contradiction. Almost, you're responsible poacher and gamekeeper a little bit from a point of view. You flew in last night from Jersey, so
yeah,
great.
so based in Jersey, which is great, lovely place to live, exceptionally safe. Unfortunately, that also creates a lot of cultural behavioural issues, and that everyone naturally doesn't expect to. We're very much used to being able to leave our front doors unlocked, cars as they are. It's a great island to live on, but that doesn't really transpose into the security world too well. So Altum, we are financial services, offshore based. We have 6 offices now, about 200 staff, grown over the last 3 or 4 years from about 50 upwards. And it's generally focusing in a bit of family office work and also a lot of fund administration, real estate work. So we tend to deal with everyone. There's a lot of our risk exposure really is around email. There's high volumes of data being transacted back and forth with our intermediaries, with our clients who might be high net worth individuals, or they could be large enterprise pension providers.
Fantastic. And as you said, you flew in last night and quite eclectic. How have you found the show so far, or the little bit that you've probably seen?
Yeah, so I haven't really had very much yet to see of it, but I'm here for the next 2 days, and I definitely have a bit of a shopping list, really. So I've got some projects, some bits I want to try and simplify on our existing estate. So yeah, I'll be on the lookout.
No, I think it's quite exciting. I find it quite engaging already, and a couple of things has caught my eye. So I will, like yourself, I will be walking around and getting to know what's new. Especially as I can see, everybody's mentioning AI, so we will have a look as we move forward. But what would be interesting? You just mentioned financial services based in Jersey. What are you seeing some of the risks to your industry at the moment that you are facing in the wider sector?
Yeah, so we tend to have quite a lot of, we see quite a bit of exposure really, especially from Jersey. So we have attackers who are motivated financially, but we also have those activist attackers, especially off the back of Ukraine war. We saw a lot of traffic coming from Russia, certainly with that. I think that's either died down a bit, or maybe that's just become the new baseline. But yeah, that's...
So you're seeing wider threat. And then for Altum specifically, obviously with the threats that you mentioned the activists, etc. What threats are you seeing more closer to home, I guess, is more of the question to ask.
Yeah, so the one I see, which I still have difficulty sometimes actually tackling, is the identity piece, and that we can lock down our identities and manage those internally. However, the attackers can now quite easily transpose those identities actually into real world where we don't have those controls. So, people's Gmails are being targeted, their Yahoos are being targeted, etc. Usual things like CEO impersonation. But again, that's then down to a lot of culture and training.
Yeah.
And expecting people not to fall for those and to apply all of those lessons learned. But if they do, that we still have then enough protection on the identity that will also detect those as well.
Absolutely, and we're seeing more of the CEO attacks and the impersonation attacks, especially now with AI, for example, impersonating voice. You can't trust voice anymore. So I think it's the next frontier for all of us from a security point of view. Now, I know that I'm aware, and I'm spoiler alert, Altum is very much decided on a Microsoft first approach and challenges that you face. Can you give us a little bit more of an understanding why did you do a Microsoft first approach?
Yeah, so we've done it effectively across the business system stack and in security. And quite a bit of that came down to the access to enterprise tools and the ease of that access, and also the scalability that we have there. So we can see, for example, things like the $20 billion of investments that Microsoft are committing over the next 4 or 5 years. We can have access to the tool sets that will allow us to protect across our whole estate. So one of the things we did do is take an E5 licensing approach straight from day one. So that was just before my time, but was part of effectively our cloud strategy. Really, there was that as we moved from effectively very much old-fashioned on-premise tin in a cupboard, we've gone full Azure, effectively treat our offices like remote satellites. And we've been able to effectively, as we become more mature, make sure we effectively tick off down the list of capabilities that we have access to within our E5 licensing, rather than having to potentially balance licenses, restructure them, keep going back to the board and looking for more budget each time.
And so from your point of view, having the whole technology stack and the solutions in one place, one license, seems to work very well from a commercial and financial point of view.
Yeah, so my previous place, we weren't as much Microsoft entrenched.
Okay.
And there was definitely some inefficiencies when responding to incidents, having to go to one portal, one different supplier. Despite having a SIM, there still wasn't as integrated, whereas now we might still have to go from one portal to another. That seems to be getting more and more concentrated, but it does make a lot more efficient, and actually the quality, of the output and the protections that we're seeing there, those threat protection tools, as we keep also seeing in Gartner top right quadrant every time, it's an easy sell when you're going back to the board as well.
Fantastic. Now, maybe I know we're not technical around this table, so I won't go ask too technical, as I say. But what would be interesting is there any of the technologies that you lean on quite heavily in the Microsoft stack on a personal basis, by any chance? Or
so on a personal basis, I'm always using Copilot M365. I would not give my license for that back. So yes. I do wear a lot of hats, certainly a lot of security hats, but also a lot of hats within technology team. So updating policy documents or drafting new policy documents, because we have quite a few regulations that we have to adhere to. And also, actually, I find when I do dip in and pretend to be a SOC analyst, writing those KQL queries, actually, I can pretty much tell Copilot what I'm after, give it a rough bit of guidance, and it'll probably hallucinate the first time around, but with a bit of correction, it'll get me there.
Yeah, but the good news is you actually know what you're looking at. So half the chances you've got to ask the right questions and know that it's not hallucinated from a point of view. No, that's great. Now, with the Microsoft first approach, I'm going to be a little bit controversial at the moment, is I get people a lot of kickback still. Well, we like the layered approach, all our eggs in one basket. How would you respond to somebody that says we are concerned that everything is with Microsoft at this moment in time?
I think that if Microsoft are having a bad day, then we're probably all having a bad day, whether we've got all our eggs in one basket or not. We've now been there for 4+ years in sort of that eggs in one basket area. And yes, we have seen blips with things like Azure, some 365 outages in certain regions. But actually, all of those have been quick to respond and have caused minimal actual issue. And generally, everyone is pretty understanding, because normally they're also suffering from a similar blip. So we do try and design some resilience around that as much as possible. So things like Azure Site Recovery for our critical business machines. We do have another layer of email that we can one day fall over to if we ever had to. And we do add some additional layered protections because, as sort of alluded to earlier, email is probably one of our biggest threat vectors. So we do add additional protections onto that as well.
No, fantastic. And I think you already answered my earlier questions around cost, but I still see organizations when they look at, like you mentioned, the M365 E5 license, it sounds expensive per user per month. But have you found, what was the board's uptake on the fact that it was this number per user per month? How did you justify it, I guess, is more the question.
Yeah, I think it's the security benefit that it provides is easily outweighs some of those potentials there. So we've demonstrated that, and especially we've demonstrated it when we've protected some of those senior board members. Admittedly, that is, post them making that decision. What we see quite often actually is that the brand recognition that also comes with Microsoft, also that pushes downstream onto us as well.
Okay.
So it helps reflect well of us that we've gone with a named partner that people recognize. And we do get a lot of due diligence questionnaires which regularly come through. So by putting down Microsoft and explaining, yes, we've got the E5 licensing, that's quick to understand, and they're not likely to have many follow-on questions rather than trying to explain that we've got a small niche provider that's doing our phishing protection that they haven't heard of, or for our MFA or something. It just makes it much easier to keep it all in one box there.
And I see that on a day-to-day basis, is trying to explain to people where the security is. And it does help now that you get the Mitra Ingenuity attacks, for example, which give you the unbiased results, and Microsoft being named leader, just scored 100% on Linux and Mac. Because let's be honest, we're not just Microsoft houses these days, we all use other technologies. But what would be interesting, and I know that we started working with Altum actually before you joined, but what would be interesting is, how have you found working with Softwerx, and why do you continue working with Softwerx as your security partner?
I'd say it's the alignment with our own strategy there. So with that Microsoft first piece, Softwerx, very much aligned on that front, which really helps. And then it's effectively the trust that's in place. So there's, we're not constantly selling and suggesting other tools, only to then find out that we're actually already licensed, possibly with our E5 stack already. It's, and then there's you've got the constant name changes coming from Microsoft, and also the constant new releases. So we do run a very slim, agile team, and effectively I'm able to lean on Softwerx for those constant developments, rather than spending however many days a month reading the latest Microsoft releases, especially as we do try and stay towards sometimes in the preview state, but generally towards whatever the latest general availability stuff is.
Yeah, we're finding that the roadmap is very long at Microsoft, let's be honest, and every day is a school day, as I like to tell my team from point of view. Now, working with a partner or somebody who's looking to adopt a Microsoft first approach, why would you recommend they should work with a partner, or maybe they should not?
So I think it, especially for the SMB size of market, it effectively removes a lot of the needing to build your own team, especially if it's going to be someone otherwise who's effectively got a bit of a job share there. How are they staying up to date on things? So as long as you can find that trusted partner, then I think it does simplify everything completely, and that they are going to work with you to effectively work along your strategy, get your maturity up, rather than constantly investing and learning everything new. Finding a partner who's actually done it before, and when you speak to them, clearly has all the knowledge of the gotcha moments and how to do it correct first time. Yeah,
and we're seeing that. And I guess what would be quite interesting as well is you've been on this journey, you've lived it, like you said, for the last few years, you've adopted it, the Microsoft first. What advice would you potentially give somebody who's looking to start this journey? Because I keep hearing this, we are uncertain, we are not sure, we don't even know where to start. That's my favorite.
Right. I think there's definitely, so you've got the governance elements around, documenting your strategy, setting it out and getting the agreement up front into that. The actual real world parts of that, I think, are looking to leverage a lot of the Microsoft tools that are out there. So there's the adoption center, looking at things like Secure Score, which didn't when I was looking at it first time around, but certainly now has themes. So if you can look at it by some of your risk exposures and pick off, you can have a lot, say, we think we're a lot more exposed to business email compromise, and it will give you, the expected control sets to implement there. And then that, coupled along with things like security baselines, I think can just help you instantly, get some quick wins up front.
I think so. And I think as you move forward, there's what I'm finding is all the new technologies they're delivering, like their attack path analysis. What a fantastic addition. Help you identify what should I patch, what critical attacks I've got coming forward. Oh, that's fantastic. That's very useful. Now, you touched on AI, Copilot. Sorry, you won't give it up. what would be interesting as well is to get a little bit, how have you found it? Because we've got the Gartner hype cycle, and as I say, I'm in the trough of disillusionment. I'm working my way up, as I said to you last time. But what have you found from adopting Copilot? Has it introduced new risks into the business, or has it caused you any headaches from a governance point of view?
I think for us, we've chosen to effectively go full Copilot across our staff. And by providing them with an AI LLM toolset, then we're pushing them naturally towards the Copilot path. And it's much easier to prove why we're happy with Microsoft than it would be to go out and say, well, hold on, I want to trust this other LLM tool. Where's the data going? What are they doing with the data? And then how much do we need to do around vendor management and also our customer management piece as well? So actually, by keeping it within the Microsoft stack first of all has been really helpful. And then I think we've seen that staff have adopted it. We've again leveraged a lot of those adoption pathways to really push them towards it. And I guess on the then technical controls, I have put in place some blocks at the moment to stop them going out to at least the big name other providers as well, so that they are going to get a big red block page warning saying, sorry, you can't use this model that you were thinking of. But then they can quite easily come back to us and we'll say, well, hold on, didn't you know that Copilot can already do whichever feature it is that you're looking for?
Yeah.
It definitely feels though that I guess with a lot of the Copilot offerings and a lot of there seems to be about 20 plus, I think, Copilots at least by now. Microsoft are playing, some parts of catch up at times with that.
Yeah.
So actually, especially in the security pieces, then I'm only just starting to now look into some of the purview capabilities to actually see, hold on, what unsanctioned tools might the users be going after. And thankfully, when I have checks there, it seems it's all good news story, yeah.
Well, it's great to hear you got a good news story. I was with a customer the other day who was adamant they don't use generative AI in the organization. We locked into the Cloud Apps Discovery, and we found 37 different AI technologies being leveraged. So it was quite an eye-opener for him. And then I think this is quite interesting. Like you said, you've enabled all of your staff. You either give them the tools, or what you will find is they will bring their own tools to work. Because let's be honest, every mobile phone, every device these days is an AI in your pocket, and it's become a real challenge. And we're seeing this. And I know that when we were in Jersey, you and I had a chat, and we did a whole session on securing and monitoring AI. And we're seeing that with Microsoft, the new purview, the features, the DSPM for AI, data security posture management, understanding it. But that then also offers, from a governance point of view, a completely different approach that you have to think about. How do you discover this information? How long do you want to maintain it? Did you advise your staff in the right way? And I guess from a legal point of view and a compliance point of view, it's a new environment for you to monitor, because there isn't any real legal guidance on it yet, from what I've seen.
Yeah.
I don't know how you're finding it every day.
I'd say it's the case with most of the purview, certainly alerts and policies out there, is that they become less of a SOC problem and more of an internal governance HR type problem as to, okay, we've got an alert here effectively around insider risk and it's risky behavior. Do we actually have a policy already around in the staff handbook which says how you can do these things? Do we have a threshold? What's going to be the escalation path? And we have to be mindful of that, as if we just turn those on, there's probably going to be quite a lot of policy breaches straight away.
And that's right. And it's not really like you've just touched on, it's insider risk. It's not really a SOC security issue. It's more of a legal risk compliance. So who in the organization is going to be able to make that judgment call? Yeah. And it's not really an IT function, is what I'm finding for a lot of organizations. Is suddenly they think, do we need a new department, or where does that responsibility sit? No, that's fine. And you being this far on your journey with Microsoft, there's so many new things that are happening. What is next for Altum on this journey?
I think it's continuation probably towards the zero trust model, focusing more on the identity piece. Could be a bit of a pivot away from things like Azure Virtual Desktop and more to on-device. And then I think also the other bits that needing to look at are around increased mobile management, making sure that all of our controls the same control set that we have got on the desktop layer effectively are being applied to mobile usage, because we do see increased uptake from that for things like AI and continued bits around AI, DLP. I think that's that, and I can see, especially with again AI and MCP type technologies coming along, is going to be more around the API piece as well.
Yeah. And it's those new security. So it sounds very much data security, and we're seeing that to be the next frontier, really, for a lot of the organizations we work with, where we've secured the devices. And I think there was a statistic that says 8% of devices that has been enrolled suffered breaches only when you look at the breaches that done. But 92% of all breaches that happens is from unmanaged devices. So getting those devices managed, getting those devices secure. But now it's also, how do we secure our users, the data? Because let's be honest, that's really what's important. The rest is enabler. Don't want to suffer the crypto viruses. There's the obvious one that I do. I was watching a BBC documentary the other day on Redcar, on how everything was shut down and the disruption it caused with the council. And I think this is a challenge we're seeing. We are securing the devices with the Microsoft First approach, but the next frontier sounds like it's going to be the data. And then how do we mature the organization into that data taxonomy? And I guess one of the questions I've got is, how have you found adopting that data taxonomy inside Altum?
That is definitely still very much, I'd say, a journey for us, especially, new tools come, as was just said, along from Microsoft all the time, and suddenly they're available to users. Sometimes with zero warning to the admins as well. So that can create a bit of a wild west of rogue naming conventions, access rights that you weren't necessarily expecting, people putting data away you wouldn't necessarily expected as well. On the DLP side of things, then I guess we're very much following sort of the Microsoft guidance there around the structured, looking at internal docs, restricted docs, and then layering on controls once we think that users are actually handling those well and understanding them. On top of that, around preventative and detective controls there. But it's ideally there's quite a bit of education which needs to be done.
Yes.
But if possible, let's try and make it as seamless as possible. And actually, a lot of these pieces are automatically applied. When a user's opening a document for the first time, for example.
And I think that's the challenge, is trying to make it transparent to the user, not intrusive, without stopping the business, but making sure that the data stays secure. And it's a fine balance. And I always find that you've got to test it. It's that unforeseen consequences, like what one of the customers I worked with decided to encrypt every document, and it's taken them years to roll it back, shall we say, from a point of view, because they don't quite understand that encrypting every document, you need to decrypt it before you send it externally. And even if it's a low-level value document, why encrypt it? And I think that's a challenge we're seeing. No, I really thank you very much. It was quite engaging. What I would like to say, if there's any questions that anybody's got, feel free to ask. We'll be around after the session for a bit if you want to have a chat. But this Microsoft First approach, absolutely, we're seeing that to be the future. We're seeing more of it, and we're seeing that AI agents is the next step. And I think that's going to be interesting for all of us, where they've said that we're all going to be managers of AI agents in the future. We're going to have our own army of AI working for us. I'm not so sure about that. I'm hoping that I'll be retired when the machines come for us. But it will be interesting to see what the future holds. Thank you very much for joining us, and feel free to engage.